It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. Have you ever had people say to you, nobody listens to me, right? I've heard it all the time. So the question is, why are people not listening to you? What are you doing that's causing people to not want to listen or not want to hear what you have to say? I mean, we can write it off and we can say, let's go straight to the office of Dilbert and just say they're stupid. They just don't understand, right? But I think more times than not, that's not the logic or not the reason. I mean, granted, sometimes what you're proposing may be outside of the capability of their understanding, but it's not something that you should throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and just say, hey, teams are stupid. They're never going to learn. You can be completely good at something, but yet still be bad at something. I know it sounds weird, but when you're thinking logically about how to do things, sometimes logic goes out the window. And I think that with teams, especially when you're trying to coordinate, when you're trying to go through a listening pattern, when you're trying to do the things that you need to do for diagnosis or to think things through logically, you have to face the fact that sometimes the team may have heard different words than what you actually said, meaning that, the words you say weren't exactly how they heard it communicated. So I think a big part of trying to get people to listen to you is saying things in a way that's going to make it clear and concise and easy for them to understand. I think too often people don't understand, and as a result, they fly away and say, this is interesting, but I don't know how it applies to me. And that's the disappointing part, because we need to make sure that if people are listening, that we're communicating well. And part of communication is stopping and listening as well. Now, there are many, many forms of active listening, right? And one of them I call the mom test. The mom test is just a great way for you to validate whether or not something was ever said the way that it was intended. So here's an example of the mom test. A son says, would you ever buy an app which was like a cookbook on your iPad? This time they're optimistically asking for a hypothetical question, and you know what I want you to say, right? So they're pushing or driving you towards a certain direction. Mom says, as if I need another cookbook at my age. The son says, and it only costs $40. That's cheaper than the hardcovers on your shelf. And then the son says, and you can share recipes with your friends. And there's an iPhone app, which you can do your shopping list. And in the background, he's saying, please just reply yes. Please just say yes. Mom says, oh, well, yes, honey, that sounds amazing. And you're right. $40 is a good deal. We'll have pictures of the recipes. So now she's trying to rationalize spending the $40. And the son says, yes, definitely. Thanks, Mom. I love you so much. So now you've created this relationship, or this courtship, if you will, be it short term, between the person who is listening and the person who is speaking. And I think that this is the type of thing that needs to happen in a workplace as well. If you're communicating clearly, but the message doesn't inspire reaction, then you have something else wrong. You need to make sure that you're inspiring action with your communication. All right, let's go. Let's expand on this a little more. Sometimes they understand perfectly, but there's something else that matters more. This one I'm guilty of. There's a lot of times people come to me and they say, oh, we need to take care of ABC or XYZ, or we got to do this right away, or we got to figure this out. And then I turn around and say, that sounds great, but isn't this more important? Isn't this more critical at this time? And I can tell you that sometimes I've completely ignored the first thing because the second thing is just driven into my skull that it's the absolute most important thing. We need to find room and make room for other people's ideas and opinions. And we need to make sure that we understand exactly what's happening. So I want to tell you a story, and this story is dark. I'll leave it at that. So if you have a sensitivity towards animals, or if you feel like you don't want to hear a sad story, I advise you to step away and come back in a few moments. So there's a canal basin near Camden. It's called Dead Dog Tunnel, where the story goes Dead dog carcasses used to be found in Victorian times, and to clean up the water, a bounty was offered for each dead dog that was recovered and delivered. Of course, they didn't specify that the dog had to already be dead. So people came in with, you could imagine all makes and models of dog. But if things don't go as planned, we need to have a way to pivot and adjust and do the things we need to do. The truth is, we like things to be predictable. So we can estimate how long it'll take to build something. And then that metric becomes a way to an end. It's just, we need to make sure that when we are assessed and rewarded, that it's not based on the number of units of code that we shipped, or what do we do, what do we do to align our time schedule with our date schedule this week? How many story points of code or story points of work, if you will, are going into something, and then is that the most valuable metric to measure? So there's more to it than that. So when you think about it in a grand scheme of things, if you're trying to communicate, make sure people are listening to you, you need to follow some advice. So when you think about strategic planning, it's really two things. There's planning, which is a list of the activities that we hope to do, and there's strategy, our set of choices on where to play and how to win. I think if we can get to that, that's going to put us in the best place. If we decide we're going to build features A, B, and C, for example, and launch them in July, then barring rains, fire from above, we could probably get that out of the door and we could probably do well. Where other things may be more challenging and we may not get the same result that we had hoped. But if we're trying to communicate better, we need to understand that we need to talk through challenging times as well as through non-challenging times. I think in order to do meaningful research, we need to make sure we're doing proper metrics analysis, usability testing, idea validation. Those are all low impact, low things on the totem pole, but they need to be done. Then we can start doing the meaningful research of gathering ideas, synthesizing information, curating our knowledge, and coming up with the best solution. So I think that if we look at it kind of like a design maturity ladder, it's going to help us better understand what we need to do in order to get things produced and how we can get people to actually listen to our side of the story and actually get things done. And stop thinking in terms of what's creating all this waste and start thinking in terms of what can we do better to improve. And I think that if you slow down and take a moment and stop focusing so much on the rhythm of tomorrow, that you'll start walking to the beat of a really good drum today. So that's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have something you want us to talk about, learn more at AgileDad.com. We'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.